On this podcast, we cover sensitive subjects such as abuse, suicide, self-harm, depression, and other difficult topics. We are not medical professionals. We suffer from our own mental health issues. Our opinions should not be taken as medical advice. Dread the Stigma is for educational purposes and awareness for mental health only.
All right, here we go. It feels like it's been forever since I heard that intro.
I know, right?
But our schedules are hectic, and but we got it back on track by not doing a show last Sunday. We're back on track because you are going to be on set next weekend, I believe.
I know, Saturday.
Yeah. So it kind of works out, that being our off week.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but like, I'm completely out of spoons right now.
Out of spoons?
Oh, you never heard of the spoon like theory?
That does sound familiar, but please enlighten me again.
So the spoon theory is, as it relates to mental health, is you wake up in the morning and you have a certain amount of spoons. So you wake up with 30 spoons in the morning, and those 30 spoons have to get you through the entire day. But some days, just getting up and getting out of bed can take 15 spoons.
Mm-hmm.
So now you only have 15 for the entire rest of the day. And
yeah.
So then you just get to the point where you have no spoons and you're just emotionally drained.
So the spoons kind of represent like the negativity you're feeling or whatnot.
Like
am I getting that right?
I guess it would be like, those battery charts or whatever, how it's like when you're the pictures of a battery and it's like all these lines and they're all green when it's full.
Right.
But as it gets lower and lower, it's yellow and then it's in the red. So essentially, I mean, the spoons would represent those lines, I guess.
Your energy level, yeah.
Yeah, but somebody, I've heard about the spoon theory for like a few years, and it's just, yeah. I don't know, like the last. You okay?
Yeah.
Was that a sneeze? Because bless you.
The water went down the wrong pipe there. Okay. Man. That cough took me so out of my head there. No, that's interesting. I have heard of the spoon theory. I just didn't know really a whole lot or anything about it. But that's yeah, I would, if I had 30 spoons, man, I'd have to be borrowing spoons by lunch.
Right? Like some days you just don't have it in you. And I don't like the past week, I don't know, like a week and a half ago, like maybe 2 or 3 days in a row, like I woke up and I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling okay. Like I'm feeling okay. And then
well, it's I think a lot of us that deal with a lot of the disorders that you've heard us mention throughout the shows, PTSD, anxiety, and I think it takes so much energy to feel good for us, whereas not as much as somebody who doesn't suffer from these types of things, because the anxiety alone or the depression or whatever just plummets your energy levels anyway. There's always fatigue and things like that involved. But I think it takes a lot of energy, at least for me, to stay in a good mood.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's just me, but I'm sure
No,
there are
I
people
fully
out there
understand.
that probably feel that way too.
So how do we treat this? Where did treatment begin? How has it evolved? Do you like that
Man,
segue?
the queen of the segue, the segue
I am very
queen.
proud of my segues on podcasts, honestly. I don't toot my own horn a lot, but beep beep, I am very proud of my
But
segues.
beep, beep, motherfucker. All right.
So on part 1 of this topic, we had discussed the first of 4 um reform movements for the treatment of mental health.
We
So
only got through the first one.
we only got through the first one. Yeah.
I
Can you
know
believe
we
we
had
got
we had a
distracted?
special guest. Yes.
So the first era was called the moral treatment era, and that's when they actually first started creating more asylums, and every state had to have one. And we talked about Dorothea Dix and
Mhm.
her incredible work that she did for the mental health movement. Um, and then we have the mental hygiene movement, and after that is the community mental health reform period. And
Mhm.
lastly, which is the era we are in now, is the community supported era. So today, maybe we'll get through the last 3, but who knows?
Who knows? Because there's a lot
There is so much.
to dissect when you're looking at how psychiatric hospitals and the treatment of such in such hospitals, how they've progressed. I don't think people understand how absolutely horrible some of these conditions were,
Yes.
and how you may have beef with the current mental health system, and we probably all know that it could be done a little bit better, and that a reform is probably should be in the future, or in the works. You can't deny that we're a lot better off
Yes.
than we were, and that's what these different movements are going to show us here.
And I don't know if you noticed this or not, but based on the timeline, I feel like we're probably going to be having a new reform movement soon, in the
mm,
next decade or so.
yeah, going by how they have this,
Right?
outline.
I was looking at the time periods, and I'm like, as much as I still think 1970 was 30 years ago compared to almost 55. But yeah, I feel, looking at the timeline, that I think we are in our lifetime, we are probably going to see we're going to see number 5
Mm.
in the reform movements. So on that note, when did the mental hygiene movement era take place, Otis?
1870s,
That is,
early 20th century.
it's you hear 1870 and you're like, oh, it's 2024. Like, in the grand scheme of time, it's not that long.
Mm-mm.
But
No, not at all.
so to see how far we've come since 1870, and you figure the United States had already been around for 100 years at that point.
Right.
So do
There,
you
there
want to
was
talk
yeah,
about it?
because there was a lot of the people heading the reforms. One of the big things that they were criticizing was overcrowded conditions
Mhm.
in the asylum. Of course, this being the mental hygiene movement, the more overcrowding you have, the more likely you're going to have things spread. It's just a feeding ground.
Yeah.
One of the other things that they were concerning themselves with was the overuse.
100%. We're still
We're
lagging
still
behind
lagging
a lot
behind.
of.
Absolutely, in 2024, how is this? How is this possible? The overuse of physical restraints and lack of innovation and treatment. The treatment wasn't progressing.
Mhm.
They were. It seems like they've kind of stayed, stagnant in the early 20th century and the 19th century. They kind of stayed stagnant. A lot of the treatment wasn't getting any better.
Mhm.
Um, Overcrowding the situations, again, a very, very, a public health issue there. That's horrible. And let's see.
Well, I will say that,
Mhm.
when you look at the term mental hygiene movement, like what does that even mean, you know? So it was actually conceptualized by a psychiatrist by the name of Adolf Meyer, which we won't hold his first name against him. Um,
Yeah.
so he describes mental hygiene as the biological or pathological origins for mental illness and linked psychiatry with neurology, biology, and physiology. So, I think for us now, like we look at, we hear the words like serotonin and dopamine receptors. They didn't know about that back then,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
so when he was showing that mental health is related to things going on in the brain, like that was like a brand new thing that nobody, people weren't understanding. So
Yeah.
he was the forefront of that, and it was his idea that you know seeing these disorders early on and treating them early would reduce the severity and reoccurrence of it, which, um, if I remember correctly, we did talk about in the first part of this topic, was they wanted people to not be disabled by mental health treatment. That's by mental health illnesses. And that's why they had started this whole movement to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want people to be like that. Um,
Right.
Unfortunately, it's something that's, I feel is there's always going to be somebody that it's disabling to. Um, so Maureen, not enough care workers for sure, and cost for starters. Yes, it's very
Mm-hmm.
expensive. So after Meyer, do you want me? I always feel like I take over. Do you want me to keep going?
No, 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 absolutely. Keep going. I was reading through this earlier, and again, there's so much, so I'm
Right? It's
kind
like,
of,
where do you even begin?
skimming along.
But I found it
Man.
interesting that they talked about, there was a man named Clifford Beers, um, and he actually put out a biography in 1908, um, which is just about the time that, Meyer was coming up with his research. Um, so in Beers's autobiography, he talked a lot about the conditions that he endured while he was battling psychosis. And he even went on to describe, um, that he had spent time in several different mental health institutions, and how even abuse from staff members that he received created
Yeah.
additional trauma that he was now suffering from,
Seems quite counterproductive.
right? Um, so his story kind of helped spur the reform, and it it showed public perceptions of mental illness. It changed people's public perceptions of it, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, because they were like, oh, well, we've made all these improvements. It has to be fine. But he's showing you that it's not. Just because you make the improvements on paper doesn't mean that it
It's
actually works.
manifesting. Yeah. Right.
Yes. So Beers actually teamed up with Meyer,
Mhm.
and
And
another
we're talking 1909. Sorry to cut
Yes.
you off, but 1909, if keep that little nugget in your head that all
Right.
this is really taking off, I think, to,
Just a little over a
affect.
century ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know? But they teamed up with a psychologist by the name of William James, and the
Good
3 of
old
them,
Billy.
Billy James,
Old Billy.
they formed the National Committee for Mental Hygiene, and they endorsed mental illness as a treatable condition. So that was, helpful for people.
And it goes on to say that, yeah, a treatable condition, and even more chances of treating it if it's detected early.
Yep.
And you intervene in this and are able to see the signs, which comes education on what it is. So that's so important. It's something that is still to this day stressed, with mental illness, with physical illnesses, any kind of illness. If you catch it early, boom,
Mhm.
you have a better chance of not reaping too bad of repercussions.
So just that they formed that in 1909. But in 1890, there was actually a series of state care acts that had been passed. And the first one was the New York State Care Act in 1890. So
Hmm.
these laws required states to assume financial responsibility for the care of individuals considered mentally ill that were now in state mental hospitals, um, rather than other we, asylums well,
Right.
that were operated by local counties. So it provided like a centralized state-run regulatory system so that everybody was kind of on the same page about how they should be run, how people
Hmm.
should be treated. So it was supposed to solidify psychiatry as a main form of care for individuals with severe mental illness. Um, so the original goal for providing treatment in state hospitals had diminished. Oh my god, I can't even talk. Um, so it's like they came up with this great idea, like, oh, we're going to have these hospitals where we're going to take care of people and we're going to help them with their issues. And what happens with every good idea?
Burn to the ground.
Burn to the ground, my friend. And so it actually they kind of steered away from that, and the efforts that they were supposed to be focusing on improving people's mental health and things like that, it ended up they just started admitting older patients that they saw were having um what is the word I'm looking for? Having well, they were experiencing senility. So they were like either
Like
dealing with
dementia, like maybe,
dementia
yeah,
and they were just becoming senile. So they
yeah.
just started admitting these elderly people as just like a way to so that they weren't responsible for them anymore. Like, oh, we'll just put them in
Yeah,
there. It's a state-run facility. They'll be taken care of. But that's
sure.
not what that was for. Like,
And a lot of them, not to cut you off, but a lot of them were treated as, well, pardon the term, but dumping grounds. They,
exactly.
with small children who, either had, there were, I can't remember the name of what they would call them, but yeah, they were basically like tuberculosis
Oh,
house, institutions,
yep.
but they would also house mentally ill,
Is it
the elderly.
indigenous?
Yes, yeah.
I can't. Ugh. My
So some, I
pronunciation
know
is
what you're
off tonight,
talking about.
clearly, if anybody can tell.
But yeah, they were literally dumping grounds,
Mhm.
where, hey, society doesn't want them. Their own families, in a lot of cases, doesn't want them. Boom, let's just drop them off to the state. They'll get the care
Right?
that they need.
Because now, not only do they not have to worry about them, but these local communities are like, "Hey, we don't have to pay for this anymore.
Yep.
If we put
Yeah.
them in state-run facilities, it's not our problem,
It's out of our hands, and we don't
financially
have
or
them
even
running
just."
around.
Exactly.
It's
Crazy.
horrible. And
So
a lot of
now.
times, and they would also euthanize mentally ill as well.
Mhm.
There was a euthanasia program in the early 1900s
Yeah, and you talked
out in the
about
Midwest, actually.
overcrowding earlier as
Hmm.
being like an issue. And it's because of this. The local communities are pushing all these people into these state-run facilities so that they don't have to deal with it. Well, what does that mean? Then that means that the state-run facilities are just now overwhelmed,
Yep.
you know? So again, and this happened in the movement before, and Dorothea Dix commented on it. It's like
Hmm.
the they were supposed to be taking care of mental health, and again, these facilities have just become cus- custodial care facilities. So, they promised new scientific advancements with the social reform, and the psychopathic hospitals just didn't live up to that promise. And it's it's sad because people will really, I'm sure, obviously I can't speak for anybody because I wasn't alive back then. But I know, like, if I was struggling and I knew that they were coming up with these things to help, and I see it just getting pushed down the tubes essentially, like, it would make my mental health even worse.
Even worse, absolutely. Yeah, and
Invalid, is that what you were looking for, Otis?
you were the one
Well, I
trying
said,
to,
because you said you were looking for the word, and I was like, was it indigent? And then so Isaac is saying maybe invalid, but
yeah,
I don't
that
I don't
that
know if that's what you were. I don't know. I'm not in your
if
brain.
not, that one fits. So we'll say,
Yeah, I'm
yeah, that's
sure.
the one.
Um, and Ashley says it's sad. It is very sad,
It is very sad. And one of the things that sticks out to me as I'm skimming through, and it actually going, along with what you're saying,
Mhm.
is the local communities and municipalities take, and they get financial benefits from
Mhm.
taking all of these senile patients, mentally ill patients, those that are sick, or needing maybe an in-home nurse, as we have now, needing that 24-hour care. Um, but the problem is, at least on the mental health side, these state hospitals really had no idea how to deal with psychiatric conditions.
No.
They were not tailored to it.
Mm-mm.
They wrote, so with not knowing how to do those things and treat these people. I don't know if they knew how to treat the ones that needed that permanent care, that 24-hour care, or any of the senile patients. I'm sure they probably had a little bit better hand on that than they did the mentally ill, because it was very early in the whole process of learning about all this. That comes with not knowing how to treat these patients, comes with experimental treatment. hey, let's pump a bunch of voltage in their head because we really don't know what to do. So let's just shock the hell out of them. And then you get these really brutal, inhumane ways of treating these people because they've been pushed into a state hospital that isn't, ready to deal with this, or can they?
Right.
It's a horrible domino effect that's happening.
Well, I mean, and so this reform period takes us up to the time of World War II. So, we're looking at late 1930s, early 1940s, in that area. All this is going on. Like, obviously, World War II, a lot of it was overseas. It wasn't on American soil, which is a lot of what we've been talking about, is mostly the US, and the reform movement there. But I mean, what was it like? When did the US get involved? Ugh, I'm not good with history and dates, but I'm gonna say like
Nah, me neither.
42-ish. Um, if all this is going on, do you think that they care about mental health? No.
Yeah, it's definitely going to take the back burner. You got a war going on. Hopefully, I wasn't talking over you because you froze for a minute. And I
You
didn't know if
froze,
you
and I
kept
was like, "Oh
talking.
my god, is it just silence?"
Yes.
So
But no, absolutely. Wartime, nobody's really
yeah.
thinking about that. I guess they figure they'll just deal with it when the soldiers come back with shell shock, as it was known then. PTSD. We'll deal with that all at once, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, they not a whole lot going on
Mhm.
mental health reform wise.
So originally, when they had started all of these reform movements, the goal was prevention of mental illness by being able to treat things early. So, I mean, the way I interpret that, and I don't know if you do, ooh, thank you, Isaac. Man, I sound really stupid. Um, I was close. I said 1942. But
You were close. You said
oh my
42
god.
ish. That's
I did.
close.
But man, I feel I'm a terrible American. Um, so I liken that whole to get myself back on track now, which is very difficult. So what did I say? Oh, they were trying to identify mental illness early in order to prevent it. And whenever I read
Yes.
that, I don't know if it's just the true crime buff in me, but I immediately think of, oh my God, we have a whole list of warning signs for serial killers so that we can
Mm,
catch it early on. And I'm like, oh my God,
yeah.
I wonder what like their list of criteria was back then of things to look for to catch these things early.
hmm
So
There's a
I
whole show on TV called Signs of
oh
a
yeah.
Psychopath. I love it.
So we bring it around to mental health. It's always the mom's
Yeah.
fault. It's always the mom's fault.
9 times out of 10.
I'll struggle with that for the rest of my life. Um, so w- we're done with the mental hygiene movement, and we move into our next one.
The
Would you like to
mid 20
introduce
years.
it, Otis?
Yes, the community mental health movement and deinstitutionalization. Woo, that was a big one.
Say that one 5 times fast.
I barely said it once. Mid 20th century. And as we were, talking about the World War II. See, I can't even say that.
Yeah.
Decades following that kind of helped introduce this new movement, the
Hmm.
community mental health movement, which, and a network of community mental health centers, which is what we see now. That's
Yep.
we still see that. That's they have these networks. And they started to become prominent all throughout the U.S. at that time.
Well, because you have all these World War II vets coming back, and they have PTSD, combat fatigue, and
oh yeah,
state officials are like, we can't just throw them into these places. Like, it wasn't sitting well with the elected representatives, which
sure.
thank God, you know. So they decided that it would be more effective to treat close to the front rather than in distant hospitals, which promoted interest in prevention and treatment of mental illness within the community, which, I mean, it always comes full circle. Their main goal is always to identify early and to be able to prevent. So yes. I have my notebook, and I'm like, ooh, I see a point down here I want to talk about. And then my ADHD kicks in and I'm like, ooh, but I was up here and now I got to find a way to bring it all around town. So I apologize. I'm very scatterbrained today. I am.
Oh no, me as well. Me as well.
I have never felt so overwhelmed and yet underperforming at the same time, if that makes any sense. So I apologize if I am not my usual depressed but on point self. I'll just refer to it as that.
No, that is
most of the time I do sound like I know what I'm talking about, but I assure you it is not coming across that way tonight. And whew, to the two people that I see that are watching right now, I apologize. Oh my gosh.
Oh God, there's 3 now. Careful.
I think sometimes we get so deep into these things that we're just like, we can't even focus enough to talk about it.
Yeah, my brain goes,
Yes.
and I get deep into it, it's like all of a sudden my brain turns into a dog with a shiny thing over here. It's like, and then I'm like, all right, I don't know where I was going with this.
Right.
Because I've been down 14 different avenues, before I even got to my point.
Right.
It's horrible.
So we have World War II and it ends. So now it's 1949 and they establish the National Institute of Mental Health. Sounds like a good thing.
It does.
So what they did was policymakers and academic psychiatrists, they shifted the conceptualization of mental health to a public health concern. So they showed that there was mild to severe illnesses, and there was treatments that providers could deliver as outpatients and inpatients. So I feel like that's a step in the right direction, just because they see that you're dealing with this, they're not just locking you up and throwing away the key.
Well, right. I mean, because, now, I mean, really, it seemed like their vision was to kind of spread it out among, on the board. You can go in and get, a more, a 5-day, evaluation. You can be or you could just go on your day off and get, and talk to somebody. So, I mean, that, like you said, took the whole option of let's just, throw them in this place, throw away the key. They were better. It was better to treat them. Especially, I think you had mentioned with the military and coming back, they found that, those psychiatrists that dealt with military and coming back felt that it was more beneficial and more effective to treat them close at home. I think you did bring that point up, but that it also, plays a point here that they have these specific psychiatrists that deal with strictly mental or military.
Yeah.
They have them out of the VA, because who's going to understand what these vets come home to, or with. But anyway, there I go, rambling off.
Hey, that's what we do best.
Yeah.
But I think with the introduction of outpatient services, it gave the acceptance of communities, the community psychiatry approach. Oh my God. So they were starting to look at it as like these large state mental hospitals are not doing what they were supposed to.
Yeah.
So if we have these smaller groups, we can deal with it more effectively. And then we get to like the mid 50s. And what do we get? What do we get?
We get
Our
Thorazine.
first antipsychotic that is approved for wide scale use in the US.
That's
And
right.
what happens when you have one?
You're always going to get
You
more.
quickly follow up with similar drugs.
Yeah.
So
and the thing is, sure, medication doesn't work for everybody, but at this stage in the game, up until most, especially with treating schizophrenia, most of these treatments had to resort to free prefrontal lobotomies, going in with the ice pick through the eye and disrupting parts of your brain, which a lot of times left you, drooling on yourself and incapable of doing anything. So it's debilitating. Electroshock therapy, I think we might have mentioned that earlier. Insulin coma therapy. There was all psychodynamic therapy. I mean, there was all these different, really inhumane ways of treating these things before the Thorazine shuffle came.
It almost make you worse, So now that we have these drugs, we're able to phase out all of those terrible things.
It's a good marketing ploy, though, when you're trying, like, look, we can get rid of doing all this horrible, barbaric things to these patients, and we'll just give them a pill. But I've always said that these pills, in a lot of cases, are chemical lobotomies, because they're changing things. They can change things for the worst. Again, my medication has worked okay. Little adjustments here and there. I'm not putting down medication in any way. It has helped me because I found the right combination,
which is very important. So
it is.
If anybody is struggling, don't give up.
Don't give up on it. It takes time to find that, just like, with a good therapist. But
now we have these medications, so we are able to take people out of long-term hospitalizations and put them back into society. And you said part of the movement's name was deinstitutionalization. And that's what they were doing. They were taking people out of the hospital, putting them back in their homes with the use of medications.
Yeah.
So.
And that is, I think, a huge part, depending, I guess, what you suffer with. But I mean, let's just, anxiety, for example, it's hard to get integrated into society when you have bad anxiety. So what happens? Maybe they find a right combination or just one medication that alleviates that anxiety. Now you integrate yourself back into social situations that were unbearable before. So, we've come a long way in the medication aspect of it, because I still think they were very much experimenting with,
absolutely.
With a lot of this medication. A lot of it was, let's make them as docile as fucking possible. so they don't rage or anything, you know.
Mhm.
And that's where the term Thorazine shuffle came from, because it was
So it's not a dance?
no, not like the
Not the
Super
Cupid
Bowl
shuffle?
shuffle, the Super Bowl shuffle. Um, yeah, God, there we go.
Right, now we can't
Oh,
get back to what we're thinking.
I
So
know.
also at about this time that, the Thorazine and the other antipsychotics were coming out, Congress passed the Mental Health Study Act,
Hmm.
which funded a nationwide analysis and reevaluation of the human and economic problems of mental health. Hmm. So it declared that modern treatment for mental illness should enable patients to maintain lives away from the debilitating effects of institutionalization. Why do these words have to be so long? Um, with aftercare and rehabilitation as essential parts of service delivery.
I love that debilitating effects of I know you've rubbed off on.
Institutionalization.
Thank you.
We you know what we need?
Um,
We need to record it really good once, and then we just push the button and it says it for us each time.
oh, I know. Well, when I get my Roadcaster back, it has a soundboard on it. Maybe we can do
Oh my gosh.
that. You know, I just the wording strikes me odd. Because now there are studies out there that show that if you are, you know what I'm missing here. Hold on one
What?
sec. Um, oh, there we go. Been up the whole time, so I hope nobody's been triggered. Um,
Oh.
But they've shown that, you know, for people who are suicidal, that putting them into a hospital is actually counterproductive. That a lot
Yes.
of times they come out worse. So that was the first thing that popped into my head when I seen debilitating effects of institutionalization. Bam! If I say it slow, I can do it.
Right?
But
So we have the
now
we have
JFK,
right.
he signed the
He signed something
community,
else in.
huh?
He signed something else in. He's so he I was trying to go with we go from the Mental Health Study Act to JFK is signing something else into effect. And I stepped all over you like I normally do, and I apologize. I'm a terrible co-host.
No, Y-
But yes,
hey, no,
JFK. What did what
you're
did
the
what did
queen of
JFK do?
segues. He signed the Community Mental Health Act into law in 1963, which called for the creation of a national network of 1,500, seems pretty big in 1963,
Mhm.
1,500 community mental health centers,
But you know what?
with the goal of providing community-based, excuse me?
So you said
You froze
they had
again. I don't know what's going on.
oh, well, you had said that they had planned to create
No, you're good.
1,500 centers. You know they only ended up creating 700? Less than half? Less than
Yeah,
half.
go figure.
But continue.
Less than half. No, that's it.
It's sad, isn't it?
No. But you know, the whole idea of this and making it community was to reduce the number of patients in state hospitals, which
Mhm.
I think at that time was, really saving the state hospitals for the really severe cases.
Yes.
And kind of keeping it that way. If it's something that can be managed outside of the state house, that's kind of what they were trying to, do. And going back to the overcrowding situation
Yes.
that was going on. Um, And yeah, and this would save money. Wait a minute, where am I at? Here we go. Oh, the problem. Yeah, reducing the number of patients and save mental hospitals and saving money. Promoted a policy of deinstitutionalization. Yeah, I
I think
got to
that's
do
going
it
to be
slow,
the word
or
of the
else I'll
night.
step all over that.
The word of the night,
The word of the night.
deinstitutionalization. But
But yeah, you're 700. I mean, yeah, I mean, I don't get that.
right.
But historians often see this whole deal as a failure
Oh,
uh, in implementation of it. Yeah, failure.
well,
Of
also,
course, only 700 were built.
right. And now, so we said 19, what did you say? 1963, Kennedy signed that in to a,
1963.
you know,
Yep.
what else was going on in the 1960s?
Nom.
Civil rights movement,
Yep.
you know? So if you are,
Overshadowed again.
well, they I'm trying to put this in the right words and context so I don't mess it up. Um it inspired a movement of ex-patients that had been labeled as schizophrenics um, to become activists, which
Mm.
later became the consumer survivor ex-patient movement. um, so survivors and ex-patients focused on identifying and addressing human rights abuses in psychiatric hospital settings, um, including even the institutions from which they had been discharged. So, the consumer survivor ex patient movement emphasized the importance of political consciousness, as did the feminist, disability, and farm worker rights movements. So, you have all of these things going on at the same exact time. Um,
Hmm.
So this was actually often described as the earliest contemporary ex-patient rights movement. And the Insane Liberation Front was founded in Portland, Oregon in 1969. And after that, you had similar groups. You saw one pop up in New York and one pop up in Boston and San Francisco. Um, so this was an early organization of the Madness Network News, which I don't know. I don't know if they did it to be funny because of dark humor.
Mm.
I don't know. The Madness Network News.
Madness Network News. Mm.
So,
I mean, to me, it's kind of funny,
right?
only because I have dark humor
As
and I
the
use it
darkest.
to cope a lot of times. Yeah.
Fucking nom,
Festival of
man.
Creative Psychosis.
Fucking nom.
They actually
Yes.
call it a festival.
Right? It's crazy. Um, man, I can't even. There was a workshop that was called Encountering Psychosis, or Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Madness But Were Afraid to Ask. There
Afraid
was
to
actually,
ask.
they went under the pseudonym of Dr. Caligari to remain anonymous. And it was a psychiatric writing for the Madness Network News, and it regularly provided columns on the risks and overuse of antipsychotic medication. Um, so this consumer survivor ex-patient movement that was going on. So this is, during the early 1970s, and this is right before we move into our next reform movement. So you have all this going on. Um, And it was really trying to emphasize the importance of patients being given the ability to choose the course of their own treatment. So I think up until this point, they weren't really given that choice. It was, "Oh, we see you as having this issue. We're putting you in here and we're going to deal with it this way."
Yeah.
Um, and
Right.
now we get to decide our own treatment. So there is
Now,
another thing that I'm not even going to try to pronounce. The
what?
schizophrenic allogenic ugh, um Schizophrenogenic.
I'm looking.
Schizophrenic.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Ooh, I think I got it.
Schizophrenogenic.
Ugh,
Schizophrenic.
right?
Schizophrenic. There you go, man. Just say it a couple times. Yeah.
Yes. Um, and what is it talking about? Mothers.
Yeah. A lot of
Always the mothers. Always the
it's
mothers.
always the mothers. They eventually organized against the whole parent blame
Mhm.
thing, is blaming my parents for all of my mental health issues. And that kicked off the contemporary family advocacy movement. Two mothers of sons diagnosed with schizophrenia and E. Fuller Torre. What is that?
That's the name. So the
Oh,
first initial is E, and then the rest of the name is Fuller Torre, and they were a
oh,
psychiatrist.
oh.
And
And
yes.
yeah, he was a translational researcher, and his sister was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And then guess what? He found it.
What did he find?
What did he
What
found?
was he the founder of? That is the correct way to say it. What was he the founder of, Otis, for $200?
Oh, what is NAMI?
The National Alliance of
That's right.
Mental Illness. Man, again, I apologize to anybody watching or listening out there. I know I'm not on my game, Otis. I don't know how you feel.
No, I'm not either, but I'm having fun. Yeah, but he founded NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Health, in Wisconsin in
Mhm.
1979. We're almost to the 80s.
We're almost there.
You would think I thought that had been out a hell of a lot longer. Yeah,
Right?
almost there.
Nothing is ever as it seems.
Nothing
So, nope.
ever.
And what so NAMI early NAMI parents, so the parents of people of their children, oh my god, parents of their children. Psh, oh, this is terrible. I can't even think straight. Um, well, a lot of blame was being put
Oh
on family
man,
dynamics. I will leave it at that because but a lot of people were starting to acknowledge the failures of the CMHC that had peaked in the 70s. So, I think people were realizing that, hey, you didn't even
right,
create half of these places of treatment that you promised us. You didn't. So
right,
now steps in another president. And we had Jimmy Carter, and he convened a new presidential commission on mental health. Um, and it was reflecting the rise of the civil rights movement over the preceding decade. So, he's looking at what has been going on, and what can we do with this to help. Um, so
right,
his report sponsored the commission, and it focused on ethnic and racial minorities, women and individuals with physical and neurodevelopmental developmental disabilities. Oh my god. So their panel on legal and ethical issues, emphasize patients' rights, confidentiality. We haven't even touched on that ever.
I know.
Nothing has been confidential up until this point.
Right.
Think about that.
Up until 77.
77
was
is
just
when
like that. That's
confidentiality
unbelievable.
finally comes into play. That's crazy.
Unbelievable.
And they also came up with a policy, and it focused on those that were deemed chronically mentally ill. So what do we say? We were always looking at just identifying early and treating it. And now we're getting to the end of the 70s, and we're realizing that some people may just be chronically mentally ill. Look how many years did it take to get to that point?
Yeah.
You know what, we talked about Dorothea Dix, and that was the early 1800s, and now we're nearing the end of the 1900s.
Yeah.
And we're finally taking into consideration that, hey, people should maybe have a say in how they're treated, and maybe we should keep their info confidential and not tell everybody. Ashley says that her aunt did the Thorazine shuffle in the early 80s. So,
Yeah. Not to be confused again with the Super Bowl shuffle.
Mm-hmm. So now we've reached in the timeline of the community supported era. And that spans from the late 1970s. So probably about the time that Jimmy Carter's what, oh my God. What is the point of writing down notes if I can't even understand what I wrote down? So about the time that Jimmy Carter's Presidential Commission on Mental Health is put into play, we move into a new era. And that new era is called the Community Support Reform Era. And it brings us to where we are at now. And like I told you earlier, I really feel like, because look at the time for that last movement. It was it was World War II. So, we're at late 1930s to the end to the mid late 70s. If anything, I'd say we're kind of overdue for a new reform, right? Based on that timeline.
Yeah. I mean, right. Yeah, we were talking about that. Yeah, we should be, coming up.
We should be
on some sort of new reform movement. Yeah. And I think I think you would think that every, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, like there'd be a committee to look at everything and see, just do an overview of everything and see what needs to be fixed. What can we do here? Is everything okay? And, I guess it takes, a century to do that.
So,
are you frozen? There you are.
Oh, I can hear you now. So, what is the community support reform area? I don't.
It might be.
I think I wrote it down in layman terms that now that I can understand in my own writing. And I wrote down that it shifted the focus to caring for those that were already disabled by a mental disorder. And it also embraced a broader social welfare framework. And what was that framework? Well, that framework included services such as housing, case management, and education on mental illness. And I think we lost Otis. We lost Otis. So I will. Otis is popping on in another thing. I will just try and continue on with the community support reform era. So
why am I in twice?
Oh, no, okay.
Oh no, I got it.
I didn't know if we
I'm
were gonna
not
lose
sure what's
everything.
going on here.
I don't. We're doing a shuffle right now.
My internet is going absolutely nuts right now. We're doing a shuffle right now.
I just got dizzy.
Look,
But so
now you're frozen. But hey, you know what?
I can hear you.
This
So
kind of works out. What?
I feel like we're having a lot of
What?
technical issues. We only had one more to get through, Otis, and
Who is you are?
wait, what?
We may just have to have do a part 3. I don't know.
Because you've frozen on me a few
You
times.
keep freezing, just staring off. Well, you froze on me
That was
more.
all right. So we will be back with part 3, where we will finally finish all 4 of the mental health reforms, and we will be on top of our game for that episode. I assure you now, because I am quite disappointed in myself, honestly, because I feel like by me not being on top of the research and I don't know what's going on. My head is just like overwhelmed, so I'm having trouble like processing, and pronunciation obviously has been a big issue for me tonight. I don't know if it's just because I'm stressed or it's just like my head injury is playing an issue, and I feel like because of all those things combined, like it comes across as I'm not taking it as seriously as I should, and I do take it very seriously. And Otis, I do take it very
Oh,
serious, and
I know you
I
do.
apologize to anyone tonight that had tuned in, and if it seemed like I was making a mockery of anything, I assure you I was not. I just really, my head is very messed up right now. And maybe I should have taken that into consideration before the show and said, hey, maybe I'm just not in the right mindset for this. But, I I tried to go through it and it did not work out in my favor. And I apologize. So
I think it went just fine.
I don't know. Now I'm going to feel like, you know how it goes? Like you get one little thought in your head and it just, that one little cluster, and it just builds and it builds. And
there you go. I just said we
thank you, Isaac.
we all appreciate your focus and efforts. That's right. And sometimes, it's hard. You get a little off, can't think straight. And Betty says, you're all right. Everyone's allowed
Now I'm
to
gonna
have
cry, and oh my
spoon
god.
days.
Why do I cry in every episode, Otis?
I don't mean to laugh, but it's kind of true. I don't think you did on the last episode, did you?
I don't know.
But you did have a streak there. But
I
that's
did.
all right.
It's back.
Maybe the show's working then.
I
don't know. I
so.
guess it's not supposed to make everybody cry.
I'll cry I think I've shed enough tears for everyone over these weeks on this show. I don't know. I don't know if I'm sure you do it too. You just beat yourself up over something. Like, this is going to bother me now until the next episode. And I'm going to be like, I did such a fucking shitty job. And you know what that means? It's going to be 100% better next time. And I promise each and every person that has watched tonight that in 2 weeks, when we come back and finish part 3 of this series, that I will be a lot better.
Hey, no worries. We got out some good information, and hey, even
in
on
little
good days,
pieces
I
that
can
people need to put together. Deinstitutionalization.
Look at that. Look,
What?
bam.
What?
That was dead on.
Oh, how I pronounced it?
The institutionalization, yeah.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah,
But we've reached the end. We've gone over our hour. Not that we're really like held to any standard. It's our show. We can do whatever we want.
that's
But
right.
we usually do try to stick to that hour frame. So, any last
That's
words,
usually a
Otis?
good time to
Yes.
keep people. Um, no. Other than join us in 2 weeks. We're gonna get through part 3 of this, and then who knows where we'll go down the
Mhm.
rabbit hole of this mental health. Oh, I do have a little announcement coming soon. I think it's Moonburns who did our intro.
Oh, Eric.
Is that what it is? I think Moonburns production. I hope I'm getting this
Yeah, I
right.
think that's
Yeah,
Eric.
Eric. We're gonna be having a website here soon.
What?
Oh
Look
yeah.
at you being all
There you
professional.
go. You froze.
I hope it was a flattering frozenness.
There you are.
But yeah, so we have a
Oh,
we have a website coming soon for people who will be hopefully looking forward to
yeah.
that. And we'll be able to post like research that we have looked into concerning topics that we have talked about. We'll be able to add in links for people that want to read more on the subjects we've talked about and things like that. I don't know what other plans Otis has for that. I will leave that for him to talk about. Hey, Sean.
Man.
So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And be on the lookout
Yeah.
for,
We'll definitely keep you posted.
I guess, my final
I don't
words.
know what's going on with
Yeah, I know.
that.
Technical difficulty. That's the internet, man. But I would say that my final words are if you
That's
do
the
not
internet. I got storms blowing. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say my final words are if you do not feel like you have enough spoons, take yourself out of the equation and rest and do not make a fool of yourself on the internet for everyone to see forever. But yes, with that, we bid you adieu and good night.